this is the real danger of when you have your racial enemies having your media locked down. You don't actually know what's going on in your country because they hide it and they gaslight you into this other shit, like this nonsense. I mean, the media is dedicated to two things. One, promoting Middle East wars, and two, promoting domestic wars against all white-skinned people. If you're white in America, you're under perpetual attack by this media system, by this media complex. They outright encourage people or at least incite people to commit violent acts about you. You know, during the Nuremberg trials, Julius Streicher, the German editor of not Daily Storm, Der Stürmer, was hung by the Allies. And the reason they hung him was they said that even though he himself never did anything to Jews physically, his role as an editor of Der Stürmer incited anti-Jewish feelings. So if he can be hung for that, why can't these journalists at Vice and the Washington Post and all these other magazines, well, why can't they be put on trial in front of the people? You know,
in Rwanda, when they had a civil war, the editors of the newspapers and their radio disc jockeys, right? Those guys were actually put on trial because they were the ones advocating for murdering their neighbors, right? They were like,
they are cockroaches.
Yeah. Yep. It happened all the time, and they've been put on trial and they've been arrested and sentenced to life in prison. They'll never get out. If they get caught, of course. And I think that's justice. And it's funny, that you see this happen in the United States or even in any Western country where, you have these journalists going on and on about, how white people are the worst, how men are the worst and all this shit. And yet at the same time, they'll be publishing articles like, why do you guys think that journalists hate white people? Like, this is not a reality. It's like, have you read your own fucking newspaper? Like, why are there like a dozen or more articles on the Huffington Post, in like the past year alone going on about white males? Anytime, there's a mass shooting or there's a murder or it's like a race-based murder, whatever, they tar and feather every single white male in America.
They have
one fucking guy.
They have a special phrase called unbearable whiteness.
Yeah. And white fragility.
That's a phrase. Unbearable.
When white people get called out on it, when white people call it out, like any white person, it doesn't have to be an alt-righter. It can just be like a regular white guy says, "Hey, why the fuck are you talking about me like this? I have nothing to do with this." They'll be like, "Oh, that's white fragility. You have white fragility." Why the fuck is that a phrase? White fragility.
Well, it's a phrase because they own the amplifiers and they can amplify that message. Think of I don't know if you guys remember the big wave of Knockout Game. Like,
oh God,
I remember that.
Oh Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah. Well, think of it this way, right? You're a black guy. You just did 10 years in prison for a homicide. You're getting out of jail. You pick up a newspaper, and the newspaper says you act this way and your life is terrible because white people. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And they make sure in the media to stress the fact that it's white people, the collective, not an individual white person, not Donald Trump, not even like Warren Buffett. No, white people as a whole. Now, this guy is never going to get physical access to a wealthy Mitt Romney type. He's going to have access to the white working people that can't leave their diversifying neighborhoods. What is he going to do?
Mentally ill boy in Chicago who they tortured on like a Facebook live stream and they were yelling "fuck Trump."
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I think that's just a great example of that, right?
They got off scot-free, by the way. They got free. All four.
Oh, you want to hear something really triggering? There was in Florida last year. I wrote about this when I was working at the Stormer. There was a case where it was on camera, caught on tape in a diner. This black kid that was getting tutoring from an old white guy, and the white guy was in the middle. He ended the tutoring session. He said, "All right, man, you gotta pay me. You haven't paid me in 2 months. I need to be paid." The black guy, I believe, either shot him or stabbed him or like hit his head on the ground until he died. He murdered this man. There was countless witnesses at the diner. It was caught on tape. It was put on trial. The Jewish district attorney dropped the charges. He said that the black culprit was under mental duress and that there wasn't enough evidence that he meant to murder this white man. So the kid being tortured, that's not even like a millimeter of the iceberg. What's actually happening in this country is way worse than that. Way worse. And you can watch Colin Flaherty's stuff. He does, whatever his flaws are, he does really good work covering these stories. My God, what's happening? And you know what? It's not even these blacks. I mean, sure, you can blame them to an extent. It's that they're being, one, incited, and two, there's a system that protects them from the consequences of their actions. So they feel like they have license to do these things. And when
I feel like it's a very interesting parallel when you look at the media accounts, especially the anti-white rhetoric and the violence that does happen and then is minimized by the media. When you look at South Africa contemporaneously, right, where you have major politicians going out and saying things like "kill the farmer, kill the Boer," and they've got this thing they call farm murders, which is just, I mean, really, it's a slow motion genocide of white people there. And to compare that here with the urban violence you see, right, because it's always a known thing. Oh, if you walk to that part of town and it's dangerous, bad things happen to people. People are aware generally of the little stuff, but the narrative is never about that. The narrative is never about the overwhelming facts and figures that you can see if you look at any sort of criminal data report. It's about police violence against black people, right? That's the only acceptable narrative when it comes to that now. The only narrative you can talk about when it comes to interracial crime is how cruel the police are to innocent black people who didn't do nothing.
That's what they tried to do to DeAndre Harris.
Oh, God. Yeah. Well, the thing with that is that it shows also how disingenuous the J left is. Because if this is really about police brutality, why not talk about it in a non-racial way? Like, if you really are about being colorblind and non-racist, let's talk about police brutality. Fine. I mean, I don't like the cops that much. I know that a lot of them are scumbags. So, look at that video, Daniel Beard, the young white man that was basically executed in a fucking Ramada Inn hallway or something by this.
Because he's shooting an airsoft fucking rifle outside his window, and they use it as an excuse to basically kill him.
Okay. Why didn't the media make more of a commotion about that? Where were the marches? Where were the protests? Where was the rioting? There's nothing, because this is not about police brutality. This is about demonizing whites. I mean, look at how when black cops beat that other guy in Arizona, they beat up a black guy. And yeah,
there was a recent one, right? That was like 2 days ago. There was a black guy who was leaning against a wall. They won't even say anything to him. And then he's on the phone and they start beating him up. And the guy beating him up is a black cop. And yet they're going on about police brutality against black people. But like 3 of the cops in that group were black guys, right? So
well, don't you know that he was just embodying white supremacy there? I mean, that guy.
Oh yeah, they say that. Yeah, it's embodying white supremacy. Yeah, he's perpetuating the patriarchy. It's this white heterosexual patriarchy, some bullshit.
Bro, if you know anything about the police, you'll know that across America, they're so afraid of lawsuits by Jesse Jackson types that usually the people that police you look like you. So yeah. The truth of the matter is that a lot of these police shootings are done by blacks. And when they are done by blacks, they don't show you the people doing the shootings. So what happens is that they create this false consciousness in blacks that it's white people that are coming, they're hunting them down in the street. Every white narrative. Exactly. And that dovetails too with the gun control stuff because they want to take guns away from white people. And so, this is all being done in a way that's gaslighting people that are very vulnerable to gaslighting, like blacks. You can confuse them very easily. And if you're confusing them like this, and the consequences that blacks start resenting whites on a racial basis and start attacking whites on the street, and you're going to tell me that all this black on white violence is not related to this gaslighting that the media does to them?
Well, and in fairness, because I want to include Ian here too, you see it also with the Asian community, right? They see, especially in California, there's the Roof Koreans meme because the LA riots.
I love the Roof Koreans.
In reality, right? You have a successful minority versus a non-successful economic minority, and they see it as an invasive part of their community. Where these people they're just working small businesses, but because of their cultures being forced together, and they're both cultures which are a lot more race realist than the whites are. Right, they are aware of the dynamic that exists, and it's the violence inherent in the system, right?
Yeah, hey, this is library.
And how many Asian people are? I don't know. I'm sure you know about this, Ian. The Asian man that was pushed in front of they're constantly being pushed in front of trains in New York City.
It happens, yeah, and no one talks about it. There's so much violence especially in the inner city areas where Asians are, like in Philadelphia, most recently they banned Asian stores from having bulletproof glass, and they said that having bulletproof glass was racist.
Yeah.
I remember
What could
that.
possibly be
Yes.
the motive for that other than people want you to get shot?
Yeah, I know, right? And so all these Asians, the business owners, they're like, well, the reason we have these bulletproof glass systems set up, these security systems, is so we don't get killed, because we do get attacked. When we take these things off, people will rob us. That's just the reality of these places.
I boggle. The mind absolutely boggles and possibly recoils in horror at the thought process that a politician must go through to hit the point and say, yes, that is the problem, is that these shopkeepers are making it too hard to rob them.
Yeah.
I
Saying
was
it's
following-
racist, it makes people feel uncomfortable. Like, come on.
Yeah.
No one else wants to do business there.
I was following a case with last year about an Asian guy that a black guy pushed this. Do you guys remember the little old Asian man that was on the cover of the New York Post? And it said, "This man is about to die." Really
no.
tacky. You remember that?
No, I don't remember that one.
Oh my God! So a couple years back, there was this little 50-something-year-old Asian man who got pushed in front of a train
Oh, I
by a
found it.
black.
Yeah, I found it.
Okay, and so get this little old Asian man was begging people on the subway platform to help him, and instead of helping him, the New York Post journalist took a fucking picture of him as the train ran him over.
Whoa!
Dude, yeah, it had pushed on the subway track, "This man is about to die," and then at the bottom is this huge caption, "Doomed."
Yeah, yeah,
that's
that is some
Jesus
sick
I
stuff.
am fucking
These are the
horrified.
people in our media. So get this, the black guy who did that, I'm pretty sure it's the same. I could be confusing it for another case where a black guy pushed an Asian man in front of a train. But in one of these cases, the black guy was put on trial, and he argued in the New York City Manhattan district that the Asian man was drunk and pushed him. This is like a 6-foot-tall, 250-pound
Yeah,
muscular
that's
black
not
guy.
happening.
And the victim was a 5-foot-tall, 60-year-old Asian, 58-year-old Asian man or something like that. And this black guy was saying he was afraid for his life, and he had to push him in front of the train because the Asian man was intimidating him. And get this, a white NYU female professor on the jury voted to find him not guilty. That fucking black guy is walking our streets right now.
Wow.
Of course. But if it was an isolated incident, it would be like, wow, this is really upsetting that I heard specifically about this. Kind of like the OJ case was. But you hear it so much at this point that it almost desensitizes you.